Now, a bit of a change of pace. Father Ted made him a household name, but now the actor and stand-up comedian Ardal O'Hanlon has written a new crime thriller. His latest novel is set in a fictional town on the Irish border during that uneasy transition to peace, a place which seems pretty familiar to the one where Ardal actually grew up. And I'm very pleased to say Ardal joins us on the programme. Very good morning.
Good morning to you, and thank you for having me on.
No, it is a genuine pleasure, and you will not believe the number of messages I've had from Father Ted fans asking me to ask very specific questions. But let's talk about the book first, shall we? It is called Brouhaha. Tell me a little bit about it.
Well, it's, I suppose on the surface, it's a funny, bleak, existential crime thriller set in the border region of Ireland, yeah. It's set in a small town. I think it observes the niceties of small town life and the pieties and hypocrisies. And I've always been quite interested in that disconnect between how civilized and beautiful these small towns are, the great sense of community and the neighbourliness, and yet you don't have to scratch the surface of any small town in Ireland or Britain to find the violent undercurrents beneath the surface. And I was just interested in exploring that area. You know, I grew up in a part of the world where there is a culture of silence, you know, a slight uneasiness given its proximity to the border and the long association that the border has with sort of lawlessness and smuggling and later paramilitary activity. So my story is about a person who went missing some years previously and the attempts by a trio of investigators to find out what happened to this person and why.
Well, as someone who comes from a small town himself, I know exactly what you're talking about, Ardal. but I wonder, obviously, to what extent then the work that you do. I mean, this is your second book. To what extent the work that you do is autobiographical, or at the very least, kind of inspired by the upbringing that you yourself had.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it is in terms like the observations would be mine. A lot of the detail would be stuff that I'm very familiar with. I mean, like any novel, a novel is a sort of an alternate reality. But I suppose it is rooted in a real place. The geographical features are, I think you need those. You borrow geographical features. You borrow architectural flourishes. You might borrow a verbal tic from a real person or the way a person walks or the way a person speaks. But, and I suppose all the characters are manifestations of the writer to some degree or another. But it's not autobiographical in the sense that, like, you know, the events are not based on real events necessarily. I mean, as a kid, I was a very watchful kid, very wary. I think I was quite observant. I was a news junkie from a very early age, like from about the age of 7. I used to race home from school. I mean, when Sky News arrived on the scene, I was made up. I used to arrive home from school at the age of 7 to read the paper from cover to cover. Like, I was a very old-fashioned, slightly precocious kid. And then, of course, I was glued to the nightly news. And this was during the 70s and 80s, at the very height of the Troubles in Northern Ireland. So I was very informed by the carnage that was happening just 5 or 10 miles across the border. You know, I mean, a writer's job, I think, is to have a look at the dark side and report back with the news. I think that's a kind of an idea taken from Joseph Conrad.
Yeah. I have to admit, your first book, The Talk of the Town, bestseller. I remember reading it, and actually, strangely enough, the author who I was most put in mind of was Irvine Welsh, actually. But the other thing I remember is that I read that book quite some time ago, or 25 years ago, I think it was, that it came out. I mean, I've heard of difficult second album syndrome, but, you know, this is something else.
Well, you know, I was waiting for the right idea. You know, I think a novel is a massive undertaking, and I had started and stopped other novels in the meantime. I didn't have much joy with that. And I suppose I was burnt by that, actually. It was a very sobering experience, you know, to start something and spend a lot of time on it and realize it was rubbish eventually. So I kind of bided my time until I had a right idea. And more importantly, the space and time to give it. I think you have to commit, and you have to eliminate all other distractions. And, you know, to be fair, I was quite busy in the intervening years. So finally I got around to it.
I think that is very fair enough. Look, Ardal, we're going to have to let you go in a moment or two, but I can't have you on without at least referencing Father Ted and of course Father Dougal McGuire, the character that you played. When you guys came together as an ensemble, did you recognise pretty quickly just how much of an impact it would have, in that people like me would still be singing My Lovely Horse decades later?
I had absolutely no idea. I mean, we had a good instinct that it was funny, but we didn't really think anyone would watch it, and we certainly didn't think that 25 years on, people would still be watching it. I think it has endured. I'm not quite sure why. I mean, it still has a lovely innocence about it. I think one of the reasons possibly is that it is set in a remote island, which, if it were a real place, it wouldn't have changed very much in 25 years. And likewise, priest fashion doesn't really change much over the years. So it has that timeless quality.
That's one way of putting it. Ardal, I'm afraid we have to leave it there, but let me quote Father Ted and say good luck with the book. Ardal O'Hanlon, thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a million, Neil. Cheers. Thank you.
Take care.